I'm Tracy, one of the mavens here at Histamine Haven. I've struggled with symptoms my whole life, mostly skin issues, eczema, itchiness, rashes, hives that we had no reason why, but also a lot of respiratory stuff, sinus inflammation, exercise-induced asthma. And as I'm sure many of you know, the symptom list can go on and on and on. As I got older, I started to explore my symptoms with different practitioners. And things never went the way they were supposed to. Maybe this sounds familiar. My medical doctors didn't have a lot to offer other than pharmaceuticals. I usually stopped taking them for a while, but I was dependent on cortisone cream for over 40 years. My naturopathic doctor would try different things, and often they'd go sideways, particularly herbal formulations. There were numerous times where I had an unexpected reaction to herbal formulations that no one could explain. This is pretty typical when mast cell activation is part of your health profile. Does any of this resonate with you? A collection of symptoms that don't respond to treatment, or treatments don't work the way they're supposed to. It's frustrating and invalidating when your doctors tell you it should be working.
Hi, I'm Luca, and I realized in my early 40s, when I finally put all together, when I look back, my entire life I'd had histamine symptoms going the entire time. Hay fever as a kid, eczema, rashes, all kinds of respiratory stuff. Asthma came along, sinus congestion. Hay fever was rampant all the time. My period was troublesome. And then as I got into my later teens, struggling with migraines, anxiety was showing up. Diagnosed with OCD, diagnosed with acid reflux or GERD, had a series of things keep growing and keep increasing over the years. Now, I'd also had some accidents along the way, happenstance, ski accident, bike accident, those kinds of things. And when I would go to physiotherapy to do some rehabilitation work on my knees, I'd be doing my exercises and crying in the corner. And I remember one day my physiotherapist coming over and saying, "You shouldn't be in this much pain. I think you're just going to have to stop. You're just somebody who can't do physio." And she fired me. And she was the first of 4 physiotherapists to fire me along the way. I got to tell you, that does a number on your sense of self. You feel like you become that person. You've got that written on your chart somewhere, and word gets out, and you're just not the person who either it looks like you don't do the exercises or you're not reacting the way you should to these kinds of manipulation therapies. And it got worse and worse and worse. Is this something that resonates with you? I'm here to tell you, you're not alone.
I started to think I had histamine or mast cell issues in my late 40s. Here's what happened. I had finished nutrition school. I was still struggling with a lot of symptoms, despite eating really, really well. I was doing a gut healthy diet and lifestyle approach. So really, really focused on the health of my microbiome and leaky gut. And part of that approach means adding fermented foods. And I dove right in. I was making homemade yogurt and sauerkraut and culturing all kinds of vegetable kvass, you name it, I was making it. So here I was enjoying these supposedly beneficial fermented foods, and I started to develop new symptoms. I started to develop nerve tingling in my right leg, but much more profound and embarrassing was urinary urgency. I started peeing my pants. I would be out of the house and I'd have the urge to pee, and I'd go rushing home, and I'd get in the door, and I live in a climate with a crazy long and cold winter. So I'd be trying to get my winter boots off, get into the bathroom, but before I could undo my pants, the urine would start to trickle. Now, I didn't share that with anybody because I was way too embarrassed. I knew I had a strong pelvic floor. I didn't understand what was going on. It took me about a year of going through this before I started to think that histamine might be a piece of the puzzle. And let me tell you, nobody was talking about histamine when I went to nutrition school. So it was really hard to figure out what was actually happening in my body. Once I had that clue, then I started to question, was it histamine or mast cell activation? And I sought out a doctor who I knew could make an accurate diagnosis. And in 2019, I was diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. So finally, I had figured it out, had a conclusive answer to this whole lifetime of unexplained symptoms.
So I figured out that I had histamine issues in a little bit of a roundabout way, similar to Tracy. I was doing a protocol at the time, and I just graduated nutrition school, and I was getting into a protocol called the GAPS protocol, the one that Tracy was name checking, as a matter of fact. Great protocol. But in some cases, some of the foods are quite high in histamine, which I'd never even heard the word histamine before. So I'm away at a weekend conference learning how to cook for the GAPS diet. I come home and I had been making these bone broths simmering for 72 hours because that's what's good for your gut. And I knew at this point, having gone to nutrition school, that my gut needed some repair. So I made the 72-hour bone broth. I made a bowl of soup for my daughter and I to have, took her to her dance class, and at the dance class had the most urgent need to go to the loo for number 2. Almost did not make it to the bathroom in time. It came on so suddenly. And as you can, I'm trying to keep it family friendly here, but friend, I lost, I think, almost every organ and my dignity in that toilet that day in 0.2 seconds flat. It was embarrassing. It was mortifying. I thought I was done, cleaned myself up. It was all self-contained. It's okay. Got up, washed my hands, round 2, got up, washed my hands. And I went to open the door, and there was a lovely honey in the hallway breastfeeding her baby. And all I heard was this voice saying, "Help!" And I realized that was me. And I passed out on the floor where I had emergency number 3. They had to recarpet the whole floor. Like, super mortifying, embarrassing. Called the ambulance, was taken to the hospital. And at which point, 8 hours later, they said, well, we think it's food poisoning, but your daughter didn't react like you did. It's just your electrolytes are off. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I left those in the toilet. So it was one of those telltale signs where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm one of those people. The bone broth works for everybody, but I'm that person where it won't work for me. Go to that GAPS cooking weekend, told my story about my reaction to the bone broth, to which point somebody piped up and said, you should look into histamine. That was the first indication. So as I am wont to do, I dove deep into that rabbit hole and found about 18 other rabbit holes on my own. Started to apply the principles and make sense of what it was that I was finding online to piece together what could be an approach to help reduce the histamine in my body. And lo and behold, as I started to reduce the histamine through the foods I was eating, I realized so many of these other symptoms that I had had my entire life were starting to resolve. And in fact, many of them have resolved completely, and I don't have them anymore. Some still come to pay a visit every now and then. And I know that in those moments, I need to really keep it lower histamine in that at that specific time. Eczema is one of them. The migraines I don't get except for maybe once every 3 or 4 years now. I used to get one a month. So my quality of life has certainly improved by figuring out this histamine piece for myself. And that's what we've built here at Histamine Haven, and that's what we want for you.
Let me tell you about my most annoying symptom. By far, it has to be eczema. I don't have eczema anymore. I occasionally get a tiny little flare, But when my eczema started, as I was going into puberty, it was a blistering, oozing eczema on my hands. And it would stay with me for the next 40 years. It was embarrassing, as you can imagine, in junior high, having these hands that were red and raw and crusty. It was difficult to do the simplest tasks. It hurt to handle food. It was hard to write my papers and exams because I would be oozing and I'd have to like wrap all of my fingers in bandages so that I could successfully complete an exam. I couldn't garden without multiple pairs of gloves on. I went to bed with cotton gloves on over my cortisone cream. I had to put cotton gloves inside my rubber gloves to do the dishes. It was so difficult. And after years of cortisone cream use, I couldn't wash my hands without them cracking and bleeding, let alone even consider using soap. So eczema was definitely the most annoying thing for me. Are you struggling with something similar that is just really impacting your quality of life on a day-to-day basis? We're here for you.
All right, my most annoying symptom, hands down, pain that comes with my period. There was a time in my 20s where I would have to take 1, 2, or 3 days off. It was a particularly bad month in the middle of the month, either from school or from work. And I worked in an industry where there were a lot of men, and I sort of felt I had to defend the women and make space for the women in the sound engineering world. I was a sound engineer. And the fact that I had to take a few days off every month made me feel like it was almost an insult to my gender. And it was taking me out of commission where I looked weaker than my male compatriots, my colleagues. And I felt like you couldn't count on me. And my work ethic has always been one of the most important pieces of who I am and my self-identity. So this notion that once a month, I could guarantee that I'd be out at least 1 day, if not 3, and I couldn't be counted on to do much of anything in those days. That was really disturbing to me. It really made me question what my worth was. Over the years of figuring out histamine for myself, I've been able to reduce the pain associated with my menstrual cycle from what was a 12 on the 1 to 10 scale, I'm not joking, down to a 1 or 2. And so it takes diligence and it takes a series of steps to put in place. But I'm here to tell you, if you're here for the work and you're here for it, let's help you put those pieces in place, because I don't want you to lose 1 or 2 or even 3 days of the month. I don't even want you to lose 1 hour of the month, because we need you in this world, honey. So let's start putting some of this work in place for you.
We hope that what Luca and I have shared with you today resonates with you or strikes a familiar chord. What we want you to know is that you're not alone. Whatever it is that you're experiencing, it is real and it is valid. Your struggles are real. Your pain is real. We're here to help. Our mission is that people don't have to go through what we did. So Histamine Haven is here for you.